Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Twa Auld Heids meeting with the Yes groups, following on from the broadcast that we did last night with Chris McKelvey. As you'll know, we had quite a good conversation last night, and Chris laid out exactly what it is that him and Angus McNeil have been trying to put forward to the SNP conference. And so what we thought we'd do tonight is get as many people from different Yes groups across the country to give us their idea now that they actually know what Plan B is, because I mean, you'll know earlier on the week Pete Wishart said that he didn't know what Plan B was. We thought we'll try and make sure that everybody actually knows what it is. So without further ado, basically we have representatives here from Aberdeen, Perth, Stirling, Elgin. If I've missed anybody, if I've missed any geographical area, I apologise. But
you've missed the two reprobates. You've missed Pat Lee and Gary.
Right, okay.
They can tell us where they're from.
Carlick, Glasgow. Okay.
Just Dave, I'll do a quick introduction so that people know what we're trying to do here. One, this is being recorded on Wednesday evening. It will be shown on Friday evening. The first part of it is to ask the Yes groups and the representatives from the Yes groups to offer their opinion, their statement, their feelings about the interview we did with Chris McElhenney. Then we're going to broaden it out and just have a general debate amongst everyone. As far as I'm concerned, the numbers that we have at the moment might increase and we'll have to cope with that. It might make it a bit interruptive. But if everyone wants at the moment to unmute their microphone, I'm quite happy that's the case. And Dave will invite each person to speak and allow them the 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever, to get that over. And then Dave can invite the next person. So if you unmute your microphone, Joe, you're free if when Dave asks you to speak. That's everyone set up. Dave, if you want to take it from there.
Okay, we'll just start along the top. Joe, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you thought of the broadcast last night?
Okay, my apologies that maybe I might not stay for too long. I've got 2 little kids that I am trying, to deal with here, and sometimes, they can disrupt a little bit. But I thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Joe. I originally come from Zimbabwe, and I'm a passionate believer of independence. I lived in England for about 3 years and relocated to Scotland 5 years ago. One of the things that was attracting me with Scotland, it was, the idea of independence, because as a migrant myself, have seen the way things they were going on. I felt I am likely to be most welcome in Scotland, and I was right when I made that decision to come over here. So I supported and campaigned for SNP before I became a member. Then I later on joined as a member. So I did not see the broadcast yesterday, but obviously, I've got concerns with the way things they are going on. And firstly, as a member, I don't know what is going on, have campaigned since ever I came over here, just before the EU referendum campaign, that all the subsequent elections, they were campaigned at the backdrop of in Ref 2, in the event that, as circumstances changes. And that's what happened. Election after election, we had that mandate. But here we are now. It doesn't appear as if, there is any progress. It cannot be that if Theresa May, because she said she cannot give, Scotland, another chance to vote for in Ref 2, then that's it. Boris comes, then that's the same thing. I am very worried that going way forward, why do we think that in the next elections, the electorate, they're going to trust us in giving us, an opportunity, to lead them when they gave us several mandates that we could not deliver? It is difficult for me that when I do door-to-door campaign, as I did many years ago, how am I going to answer some of those questions because some of them, they are easy. That, okay, you always told us this, that you are going to deliver independence, but you can't. You can't because Theresa May tells you that they can't do that. You can't because Boris says so. So, it is very frustrating. Members and, the electorate, they need to know, it has to be shown that we are really doing something about it. We've been told that it has not been tested yet legally, that, in the current circumstances, which are the circumstances of the mandate that we already have, that another referendum can be deemed illegal. But if it has not been tested yet, when is it going to be tested? We need to know. We can't just sit in the darkness and not knowing what is going on. It is very frustrating. And you go also on the issues of the structures within the party. I find myself a bit frustrated because it looks like more power is centered, in the leadership. Yet leadership cannot operate on their own. We should learn lessons from the 2017 elections, because we had 50-something seats, but they dropped to 35, including well-known politicians. They lost their seats. So we mustn't be complacent at all. The grassroots, which is us people who will be going door to door, we are the ones who need to be strengthened and be listened to more, because we know what people they are telling us. There are a lot of people around central Scotland, in Stirling, where I live, who tells me that we cannot vote SNP in the next elections. And it is frustrating, because people from ethnic minorities, I did my level best to show them that, okay, this is a broad part. It doesn't discriminate anybody. So please, let's vote for this part. There are many policies that many people, they are not happy about. But I say, let's build it from within. If we are going to complain when we are outside, it cannot help. If this country becomes independent, it is going to be a better country and all that. But at the end of the day, I don't know everything about the arguments for a better Scotland. You will be expecting that those who have got knowledge about independence, they should be dealing with people like us who will be going door to door, giving the message. But what happens, I wrote letters to several people that I think they understand, the Constitution better than I do, thinking that, okay, they're going to embrace me, enrich me with knowledge, so that when I do the campaign, I do better. But they don't reply me. I find it, I don't know how to label that kind of, attitude towards each other, on things that are very important like this. So honestly, I'm very, very frustrated with the state of affairs and many things. And I really don't know. I want this plan B to be spoken about publicly and as soon as possible. We can't wait. 2021 is not too far. And even, they talk about, a broadening. I'm sure maybe I had some parts of our leadership saying that it's good, to have diversity in terms of candidates in the next election. It should start to happen now. All that, it is going to be promoted now. We start to work around it. Who is going to stand where and all those things, rather than to end up having conflicts on one seat like we see in Edinburgh. It's not right. We are actually damaging ourselves. I tried to call in the head office to say that, we need to do something about this. No reply. It's frustrating, No,
thanks very much, Joe. It's much appreciated to hear what you have to say about it. I'm going to pass over to Rory now from my Aberdeen and let him have the house say for his group. Hi, Rory.
Hi Dave, thanks for facilitating this meeting, and Mike as well. So I'm Aberdeen, I live there. I've been active in grassroots kind of campaigning since about 2011, since we got the first kind of starting gun in the first referendum. So my thoughts, so over the last couple of days we've seen quite a lot of Plan Bs coming out. I think kind of these events and what Chris has been doing in the background are probably moving things forward a bit, putting a bit of pressure on. For me, I think we need a credible plan. And we were at one of the last Indie marches, and somebody's like, what do we want? Independence? Says, no, what do we want? A credible plan. How are we going to get our independence? How are we going to get a referendum? For me, I've not seen one yet. Plan A, okay, we need to go through that motion, like Chris was saying last night. But to be honest, Boris will just turn around and say no. The concern I've got with Plan B, as outlined last night, as far as I understand it, is that if Boris says no to Section 30, and then we say, right, we're going to negotiate, what's the something just saying, well, just point blankly refusing to negotiate? I don't know how we would be able to lever that. Perhaps that needs to be explained more. I've also heard Joanna Cherry today say that, look for a legal route to a referendum. It may be within our kind of constitution, and also Pete Wishart saying can I engage with Europe and see if they'll back a referendum if Plan A fails. So my thoughts are, independence isn't so much about Westminster's permission, it's more about international recognition. So you might not want to hear it, but Pete Wishart's initial idea about engaging with Europe and perhaps Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, the other EEA countries, the ones we're going to end up trading with, the ones we need to get on side, that needs to really, ramp up, and perhaps us as yes groups, need to be putting pressure on the SNP, these other countries and trying to get that support. What we actually do then, I think we would, if we get an idea that they will support us and we get to that point where Plan A is not working and you need to pick the day, and I think you'd probably have to make some sort of declaration followed up with negotiations and take it from there. About what order that happens in and how nuclear you go with that is probably up to constitutional experts and so on. But we really need to, I think, get to a point where there is obvious decent support for independence. We're talking 55-60% regularly, so we know that if we do go for it, and people get a bit scared off, there's still going to be people there. But I believe that everything's changed over the last few months, but we perhaps need to ride this out for another few months yet. I don't think the time's this year, perhaps next year, perhaps after May next year is really the time, and I don't think any of us can afford to wait to 2024 either. But at the end of the next Parliament, but hopefully things start to move now. As you can see, by doing these events, putting a bit of pressure on people like Pete Wishart, he's starting to now talk about Plan B as well. So they want to control the situation almost. Because they see things moving, they're like, right, okay, we better get involved in this and make our own kind of case for it. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Rory. And William from Yes Perth, and you have to get North Perth, is it? In North Perth.
Yes, Perth City.
Yeah, Perth City. Okay.
Oh yes, and much of the surrounding area, no doubt. This is probably largely a personal view, because within Yes, Perth City we have about as wide a range of views on Plan A and Plan B as you could imagine. Obviously, Pete Wishart is the MP that many of our members, our supporters, helped to elect. And so a lot of people still listen to a great extent to him. One of the steering group wrote to me just the other day saying, I'm 100% for any Plan B as long as somebody can just tell me one that's feasible. And he's happy to go on with Plan A ad infinitum. And on the other side, of course, we've got Peter Bell in our ranks, and to him, Section 30 is an absolute abomination. So trying to pull all of these strands together, it's quite tricky. I did listen to the broadcast today, and I thought it was a very interesting one. I do think it's fairly obvious that just Plan A is not going to work. Boris can just refuse until the end of time. In terms of a Plan B, and again, I wasn't absolutely 100% clear what it meant from the broadcast, but listening to what Rory said, it was the same impression I took. So it's effectively using the Holyrood election as a semi-proxy for an independence referendum. So you come out of that election and say, well, we're still going with Section 30 to start with, and then if that doesn't work, we negotiate. And some people would say, well, why don't you just go straight into negotiating? So there's a slight thing there. I'd also say, by the way, that I think independence clearly should be in the manifesto front and centre for the 2021 Holyrood election, but it can't be the only thing because other parties will bring other things to it. And so you're always going to have to argue, if you're successful in that election, that that is in fact another mandate. So I think that what should be in the manifesto should be that we are going to have a referendum. We would like to do it under Section 30, but should that not be the case, we will hold our own perfectly legal referendum. And I'm rather hoping that the Martin Keating's case comes out with a result that will make that a feasible thing to happen. And I think that we do have to have that referendum at the suitable time. 2024 is far too late, but 2021 is probably far too early. We're still going to have lingering traces of COVID-19, and God knows what that will do. More to the point, we're going to have a catastrophic economic meltdown to deal with. And it's not absolutely obvious to me that that helps our cause, because people get cautious. Even if the UK government has spent the whole crisis messing it up serially, there's still going to be the case of, well, why pack uncertainty on top of uncertainty? So there's a lot in there, but I think we're going to have to hold our own referendum. I would say the spring of 2022 might be feasible, because we'll know how things are panning out. We'll have time to make our case. And I do think we need a reasonable run-up of a campaign. I don't think a short campaign will help us. I think a slightly longer but not too long campaign will help us. 2014 was probably too long, because most of the movement came in 2014 in the actual polls. But I would have said that about a year is probably worthwhile, gets us through all the seasons, gets us into spring when the weather's getting better again and when people might want to vote. But a lot of it hangs on the Keating's result, how that comes in, and of course they will appeal it, etc. But that's not our view, that's kind of my view, but it probably encompasses a lot of what people think in our group.
Thanks very much, Royal. And Pat Lee.
Good evening, Dave. Thanks very much. Hope everybody's enjoying, everybody who listens is enjoying the conversation. It's very interesting. I have 40 years experience, dating back, longer than 40 years, dating back to the first referendum that the Labour Party proposed to deliver an assembly to Scotland, and then reneged on it with the 40% rule, which took me off politics for quite some time. I'm the reluctant politician here. I get involved with the SNP locally, became an organiser in the 1990s, delivered my local councillor back 4 or 5 times with an increased majority. And what that says is, it's not politicians that will deliver independence, it's the people as one. I'm now representing the Alliance for Independence, hoping to create a platform for all of the pro-independence parties to come together, because once we prove, and this is where Plan B works, once we prove 50% plus, and I don't buy this 60%, sorry Rory, I don't buy this. Democracy states 50% plus one. And if we work together, we deliver a pro-independence majority government, delivering the polling that is taking place right at this minute. The SNP are in line for 70 seats, 70 plus if the Yes Movement Act is won. We then deliver that pro rata in the list with pro-independence parties, hopefully just one pro-independence party. The platform is getting created for all of us to come together, and we deliver that same 50% plus in the list vote. We remove as many pro-unionist MSPs, or as I call them, seat warmers from Holyrood. We've proven the absolute majority, and in international law, that is all we're required to do. It takes one country to recognise us as an independent nation, but I believe we have to have that referendum. And if we're not going to, if the SNP, after 4 mandates, is not going to hold that referendum, then your Plan B should come into play, and that should be the next election. And the next election is the 2021 Scottish parliamentary elections. So my call out is put our political differences to the side for one term. And within that one term, we can have our independence, recognised by international law, because international law states we don't ask the country we're seceding from for permission. we show the international community that we have over 50% support for independence. And we could have done that on many occasions if we'd held it between the campaign is now 6 years long, never mind 6 months. We've been campaigning since 2012, since 2014, and we're still campaigning. It's about time the Yes movement came together as one, stood as one, supported the SNP in the constituency list, and support the Yes movement, transfer that vote to the Yes movement, Yes Alliance, whatever it is, we need to stand as one, and we need that platform. So Plan B I support entirely. The next election, put it in the ballot paper, we'll have it if we're successful, we'll have it. We only need one MSP to be successful. One MSP in the Parliament in the first year can put a private members bill together for that independence referendum.
Okay, thanks very much, Pat. We'll go to Duggan Barbara for yes, name.
Yes, Elgin.
Oh, sorry, yes, Elgin, sorry, I apologise.
Aye, okay. Okay. So, in the last few days, we've had Zoom meetings with Angus Brendan McNeil, Mike Russell. We watched your interview with Chris McLeany last night, so we've been quite busy. So what we've taken from these meetings is that, first of all, because of COVID, that we think it would be insensitive for the Yes movement to be too publicly active. And for the same reason, the suggestion that the Scottish Government should call for a referendum on the 2nd of July, tomorrow, if Westminster Government hasn't called for an extension, likely resulting in a no-deal Brexit, that kind of sits uncomfortably with us. Because we don't want a government that emulates the corrupt, intolerant and uncaring government that is the Westminster Government. Time is really important. And I think, however, we've got a however in here, if there's legal action that could be taken by the Scottish Government, we don't see any reason why it shouldn't start straight away. So after the last few days' meetings, in some ways, we've been left with more questions than answers. As a constitutional issue, it's actually much more complex than I had realised. So if we support the principle of a Plan B, but we feel we need a bit more clarity on how Plan B, given the constitutional and devolution settlement issues, will work. But we also feel that the SNP have neglected the independence movement for some time. So we've kind of got some questions, and we'll maybe come on to that when you start answering questions. So that's our kind of our statement at the moment.
Thanks very much. And finally, Ali from Butterflies Rising.
Get myself off mute. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said, but one of the things for me is the way it's been framed with the Plan A, Plan B, because what it really boils down to is we need permission or we use what's within our own gift, which I think Pat had mentioned, the Holyrood election is something that is within our own gift. It's also something that our opposition can't not stand, because if they don't stand for that, if we have a referendum, we could end up in a Catalonian position that people say there's no credibility to it because the people who would have voted against it just didn't vote because they didn't recognise it. So I think that's one of the things for me about the way we frame this, and it's really about we are an independent nation. We're see it to be it, that we act like that and look at what we can do, what we use the powers that we have, and on the flip side of that, the kind of Plan A is the frame it of the asking permission, the Section 30 to give the powers to Holyrood to do this. That in itself kind of is, showing the international community that we are doing everything we can to try and make that happen. Now, that does paint, as much as we think we're not making any traction within the UK, but internationally that's acknowledged. And I think particularly with the EU, with us now being a third country, well, the UK being a third country, I've always believed that the EU would look on things differently. We're no longer, part of one of the member states. So the other kind of key things I kind of wanted to talk about was the timing of it, because for me, we're in a position at the moment that we weren't in 2014. 2014, the big case really for Better Together was status quo. You know, we've got a lot of people who are small c conservatives, not necessarily Tories, but they're quite risk averse. And, you know, if you look at the demographics of who didn't vote for independence, it was people who were maybe like, you know, the older generation, maybe a little bit kind of risk averse. I'm kind of stereotyping here. I think, you know, now we're in a position where Brexit has shown that there is no status quo and there's a massive risk, and we're noticing on the doors, you know, like through campaigning, you know, for the general election last year, that there's people who would never have considered it before that we're now suddenly thinking we were the safer option. So I think we need to be really careful that we don't lose that risk balance, you know, that it goes the other way, because once Brexit and the economy, you know, fallout from COVID hits, people will start then retrenching into better the devil you know, and independence suddenly becomes more risky again. And just finally, you know, I think the way we present things, somebody mentioned the manifesto for holiday, I don't know if it was you, William, but I do think that we should just have independence in the manifesto, but we should paint that as a vision, that we should have a really, really clear position on pensions, on constitution, people's basic rights and balances of protections of citizens' rights. We need to actually show our intention to the electorate. And I think if we do that, the opposition's manifesto is going to look pretty weak compared to this is what you can have, but that's premised on being an independent country and having the decisions within our own hands to do this. So, you know, lots of interesting discussion to be had here, but I think we really do need to kind of engage the electorate more with a vision. And, you know, there's a concept in analysis of paralysis by analysis, and you can end up just getting stuck in this endless loop. And I think we really need to start showing the vision of who we want to be as an independent country to the electorate to get people on board.
Right, well, I think we've had a statement for just about everybody. Gary's disappeared. Basically, we'll open up for discussion now, and basically take it from there, and I'll chop this wee bit out, obviously.
Can I chuck a couple of things back, and particularly maybe at Doug and Barbara and Yes Elgin?
Yes.
It was me last night that was saying that immediately after the 1st of July, we should be doing something. I wasn't thinking of a referendum on independence, but if you remember what I said to Chris, when you're speaking to Mike Russell, make sure that he's acting as an envoy to, there's a point Rory made, make sure he's acting as an envoy to the EU, to EFTA. My thinking was that one of the ways of pulling other people in from other countries, say the EU, is to have a confirmatory referendum where the people of Scotland voted 62% to remain. We have a problem because of COVID, how you would hold a referendum, but sometime between now and say the end of the year, personal opinion, I'd have liked to see the Scottish Government ask the Scottish people, before we exit the EU, or we've exited, but before we hit the 31st of December, can we please have a repeat request out to Scotland? Was it your wish to remain? I don't think the 62% will have gone down. It's a judgment. I think it will have gone up because of the consequences that are becoming apparent to everyone. Yep. So when I was talking last night, I was trying to lay the seed through Chris, through to Mike Russell, start speaking to people in the EU, start speaking to people in EFTA, speak to anyone you can do who's a diplomat, and say Scotland.
The impression I got listening to Mike was that hasn't stopped, and that we would be welcome with open arms, no problem. You know, it's just getting it legally correct.
One of the things that Dave and I are going to do a roundup at the end of the week on the Saturday, and one of the things we're going to start talking about is other plans beyond Plan A and Plan B. And one of them is the People's Assembly, the digital covenant that's being brought out. And that's a way whereby you could indicate Scottish views on remaining in the EU without there having to be a physical at a polling station referendum. There's ways we can start looking at we're all talking on here without actually meeting, right? We've all worked out ways of communicating. It's technology, and the covenant is based on that. I'm not suggesting that is a definite, but it's one of the. I just like to see the EU get confirmation that Scotland.
Well, we
wanted to remain.
We did take part in a people's referendum or a trial.
Oh yeah,
it was very simple.
Yeah,
it was easy, you know. And they say that it's secure. So one of the things I was going to say that Iceland, 72% of the people in Iceland want Scotland to be independent.
Yeah,
that's more than the people of Scotland want to be independent. It's incredible.
And would immediately recognise an independent Scotland.
Yeah.
It said that.
We're getting there, basically.
I think all the noises out of the EU have been very positive. I mean, I think they've probably done all they can at the moment to indicate how responsive they would be. I mean, to the point that, you know, Andrew Marr nearly did a backflip one day, I think, when he was doing his show. But, you know, so I think, you know, we need to set out for people what the art of the possible is, because they're not going to get it from their TVs. They're not going to get it from the media. We need to be really, you know, there's been loads of good work done by people like Leslie Reddick on like the Nordic, you know, the Arctic nations, and, you know, looking at EFTA and what that really means. And I think we need to really distill that down for people into really clear messages, because if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've done before COVID is we did a, what do you call the thing we did in the high street? We paid £500.
A billboard.
We did a billboard, very simple, not many words on it, so that people could read it. We still have a trailer sitting on the A96.
No, beside the A96.
Beside the A96 with our message on it. We had a very successful posters on a shop that was derelict.
Controversial.
And it ended up quite controversial and got into the papers, national papers as well. So, yeah, but it's getting back to being able to do that sort of thing. Yeah, but one of the other things that we've done recently is part of the Yes Highland, which is now 13 Yes groups. That's how we've had the meetings with the MPs and MSPs is by sending them a letter, the map attached of the area that we cover, which is about a third of Scotland, you know, setting out our disappointment in what's happening, and that's why they're coming back to us now. But the main thing we've taken from it is that they're quite disappointed in how we're feeling. And it's like they had no idea that that's how the Yes movement were feeling. So I don't know, but that is, that's how they're expressing themselves. And that we're now going to have regular meetings with them. So other groups, it's maybe a good idea, if you want to know what's happening, get in touch with them.
Could I bring Pat in for a minute? He has to go shortly. Hi, Pat.
Sorry, guys. I need to leave for 2:15. I would just like to, in this video, when it goes out, express that we have the means in the Scottish Digital Covenant. We have the means to prove an absolute majority in favour of Scottish independence, which would do away with Independence Ref 2. If we, as a movement, and I can't express this enough, if we act as one, we can deliver that. And that's the same at the ballot box. We have to make the mandate value. We have to make it valuable. And that can deliver the independence for Scotland, especially if it's backed up not only with a pro-independence government, but a pro-independence parliament. And we prior to COVID lockdown, the Alliance for Independence, who weren't a party at the time, were touring Scotland.
Yeah.
We were touring Scotland to get them, but we had an idea, and we wanted to take it to the Yes movement to get their approval before setting up anything. And we were successful in the inaugural meeting. We had 32 different groups with 60 people. I believe I Aberdeen were in attendance at that meeting.
And we were.
And yourself?
We'd booked you to come up.
There's an absolute need for unification. And if we can do that using the digital covenant, we can deliver independence backed up by a pro-independence government.
So Pat, before you go, can I? Dave knows that we've agreed beforehand if there's going to be a troublemaker between the two of us, it's me. One of the things that Chris raised in the discussion was that he was going to try and get the SNP to adopt a wording, maybe amended from where he is now. And then he said, and what we need is for that to be seen not as a divided wording, but a common wording related to independence, i.e. he was basically saying whichever party it is, whether it's the Alliance, ISP, any of them, Solidarity, whatever, that they all commit to having a wording which is identical in terms of doing it. I don't know whether that's workable, but can I ask you a reaction to it, please?
To deliver independence, we need to agree the whole strategy, and that's why we went around the country speaking to the groups to get their feeling, to get them on board, to create an air of unity. And if that takes a form of words, I have no objection to it.
It was only related, he went on to say that the domestic agenda might lead to other differences. I mean, that exists between the Greens and the SNP at the moment. But what I was interested in is that his thought that if the international community are looking on and Westminster are going to throw a curveball into it, if there's a wording which says blah, 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 and it's all committed to independence, goes no further than that, and all of the different parties have signed up to that, a common agreement.
Yeah.
It means no one can argue there's differences in Scotland.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't think
one of the main points. It's one of the main points I thought Chris raised that I actually thought that's important.
It's an agreed position that ties all of us together. I don't think anybody would object to that.
Thank you, my friend.
Excellent. Cheers, Pat. Yes, Pat.
Can I ask Pat before he goes? The Scottish Regional Covenant. How many have signed up with that?
I'm not involved with it. I'm a supporter of it.
Okay. I thought when you talked about it that you were, but it would be interesting to know. I mean, I've joined it. It's because you have to have your identity and your passport, etc.
On that matter,
a lot of people not wanting to get on board.
On that matter, I think that the concern is security of the whole thing. It's embedded in blockchain, and there are a number of governments around the world use blockchain as their voting system. It's absolutely secure, and by signing up, you actually own that signature. There is nobody can get in, nobody can corrupt your avenue. They can't override your decision. You own that. That's what blockchain allows. It allows you to own the security of your participation in the blockchain.
I just got a message there saying that there are 4,100 submissions, 800 verified signatures.
Which is a bit normal because we created the People's Doorstep referendum, and we have somewhere in the region of 3,000-4,000 in that. I think the hard copy Scottish Covenant has about 7,000. But the reason it's not got greater numbers is because not everybody is participating in it, and we have to prove the security of it. And there are governments around the world using blockchain. It is the most secure form of voting verification and so forth that can be found on the planet today.
We had Doug Chapman on, and I think with Phantom Power, they went over to Estonia, which is now regarded as possibly one of the leading countries. I think they're worried about it because of Russian involvement. Therefore, it makes them even more sensitive to how they protect themselves. I think that's to come out fairly shortly. And one of the things, Dave, I think we might well do is invite someone to spend time with us. How do you develop it? How do you encourage people to get involved in it? I'll leave that aside.
I need to go now, guys. I need to go.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks.
Okay, to try and get a wee bit back on topic, it's like basically Chris said, and I noticed Peter Bell earlier on was saying that everything revolved around permission, which basically was only half the story, because Chris said last night that the primary idea was to force Westminster to accept Plan A, or there would be repercussions, and those repercussions were that we could hold an advisory referendum. And as I say, that's what I think Rory came up with earlier on about Joanna Cherry today. She had said that she believes that would be legal. Of course, the Martin Keating's case will either verify that or knock it down. Well, sorry, no, that's not quite true. It won't necessarily knock it down. If they said that, if the Keatings ruling said that that it was possible, the Scottish government would have no option but to go then, or lose the yes movement. Just if you're told that yes, you can legally have one, then decide not to, that would be. And I don't think anybody's that suicidal. So, but what Chris also said was that the other options were a majority in Parliament to be able to declare if you have the majority. Personally, I don't think you can do that if you don't have a majority of the popular vote. If you had a majority of the popular vote that was on your manifesto, I believe it could be done that way, and I believe it would get international acceptance that way. I don't believe you get it necessarily with the other one. But if I could throw that in, you might want to come back. Would you like a wee thing on that, Rory?
Yeah, just going back to the kind of plan B that Chris talked about, and that negotiate. I'm not sure how that would pan out. I mean, would it be a case that we had, if they wouldn't give us a Section 30, then there would be, in the manifesto we say then we would immediately begin negotiations and independence. But it's the leverage to make Boris or whoever say, yes, we need to negotiate, otherwise they'll just say, no chance, see you later. And also, the plan A, I don't think it's going to work. And I really think we need to reach out to these European countries. And I'm hearing people saying there's quite a lot of support in Europe. It was Barbara from Yes Elgin that said that. So I've only seen really individuals. I've not seen anything about the government in Iceland, for example, because I went to Estonia and I've also heard a talk about them, and they were one of the first countries to recognise the Baltic nations, and that started off a kind of succession of recognition. So I think we really, if the actual government or people in the government in Iceland are saying we would recognise an independent Scotland, we need to get that up on billboards, and we need to get that right. We really need to get that out to the public. And the other countries, I think the EU there might be a bit of a restriction there, because I know they were prevented by law or EU rules from taking a side in Catalonia because it was internal state matters. Now the UK obviously has left the EU, but we're still in a transition period. So we really need to work out, when does this EU rule end? Does it end did it end at the end of January, or does it end the 1st January next year, you know, when we really leave and transition period and all sorts is over? So if we can find that out for certain, then you know, people in a position of influence need to start speaking to EU countries and see if they will secretly back us, or see if they will publicly back us, because I think that would really give, you know, it would give the government the ability to just say, right, we're going to go for it. Because I think just now, you know, even before the COVID crisis, they were like, oh, you know, what's going to happen? You know, will we just declare independence and nobody will recognise it? But, you know, we really need to get a bit of evidence there. That's what I'm saying.
Ali, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, it was just about the kind of question of permission and everything. I mean, the real question is legitimacy and how we get legitimacy. Because you know, we're thinking it from a very emotional side of we want an independent country, but other countries are going to look at much more objectively and rationally of what would create legitimacy for a country to be independent. Now, if we're asking, you know, for a Section 30, that's absolutely reasonable because we asked for one before and we got it. So there's a precedent. So why are the UK government not allowing it? I want to kind of go back and look at when we last talked about India F2, which was 2016. And we pulled back from that. You know, Theresa May, now's not the time. She never said no. And Boris Johnson saying no is actually quite dangerous, you know, internationally, because now is not the time was like trying to kick things into the long grass. We accepted it and said, yep, now is not the time because Brexit, we don't know what's offering. And that's a legitimate position, I think, because if we're offering people a choice, like a fork in the road, they have to know what each looks like. I think the time is literally today because we can't go backwards. We've got no option where freedom of movement's ended. We have no way back for an extension. They've let that, you know, it's hardly even in the media in England. So the time's now that, you know, the Theresa May, forget Boris Johnson, Theresa May, now's not the time. So now is the time because we now know we've got a Brexit uncertainty likely to be the hardest Brexit or a no deal. And we've got an option to look elsewhere. I think we do need to make more of the Iceland, the Nordic regions, Ireland, other like small independent nations, and see how they have performed, you know, comparatively to what we have in all these areas, not just things like pensions, but things like a crisis, like COVID, you know, things that, you know, if you were independent, it would have been your choice, your decision. So I do think we need to stop legitimising, you know, the UK government's, you know, no, because that needs to be queried as to, well, why not? Because you did it before. And you can say that actually before we had less of a case when Alex Salmond negotiated the Edinburgh Agreement than we do now. We've had 13 years in government, a series of wins in Westminster and in Holyrood and council elections and stuff. So if you're looking at this completely objectively without mentioning Scotland or whatever, you're just looking at a number of countries, the case for independence or the people moving towards an independent mindset has actually moved considerably. And I think we're so busy looking at what they think, we're not looking at the big picture of what Scotland's saying. And I think the international community will.
I think one of the things a lot of people are arguing is that, just from my contacts, is that please ask and be refused another Section 30. Literally invite the refusal so that the international community are aware. Because if you look at it the other way around, if you look at what happened with Brexit, it was an advisory referendum, not a binding one.
So was independent referendum. They're all advisory.
2, it was but won by a small margin. And then 3, to pick up Rory's point about negotiation, EU are absolutely utterly fed up with Boris Johnson and his team over negotiations. If you read the recent report from Michel Barnier, it's not just that he said we're not going to have an extension to the transition period. They've also, I think it's somewhere in the region of, the EU have given them just over 1,000 details for equality between any finance structure in the City of London and what's to happen in the EU. So far, and I'm going to get these figures wrong, I'm sure it's over 1,000 things that they want to identify as being equivalent. And I think so far, the negotiators from the UK have matched about 40 and haven't responded to the rest. That's who we're dealing with when we're talking about. That's why I'm not saying I agree with it, but a lot of people are wanting a Section 30 request made so that it can be demonstrated to the international community. Exactly on your point, Ali, for no good reason other than now is not the time. There's a refusal to allow Scottish people to exercise their democracy. Not just us who are in favour of yes, but it's a refusal for anyone that wants to say no.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you take it to the ultimate conclusion, what are the UK government saying by saying no, no, not ever? You know, so when people say another mandate, how many do we need? So we win, say we win 70 seats in Holyrood, you know, and whatever we win in the list, by whatever means from an independence point of view, whatever party, whatever. Say we ended up with 100 seats in Holyrood, they'd still say no. And I was reading from a friend's blog. Absolutely key point is that the closer we get to a really big majority, the less inclined they are to allow the referendum. So I think we're kidding ourselves if we think, but look now what we've done, that they're going to go, well, okay then, because they're not democratic. People who prorogue Parliament are not democratic. So we're kind of like, we need to know who it is we're facing here and understand the way they think, and frame that back into our language and what we're saying. And it's really simple. We're a country. If we show that the people of this country want to be independent, then it's up to the people of this country to decide that. Because if you take it to its conclusion, they are saying you can't ever be independent unless we say you can. That's not democratic, and internationally that's not recognised as being democratic.
William, you looked as though you wanted to come in for a second there. You're looking very thoughtful.
I'm always very thoughtful without actually coming out with anything worthwhile. I hear that now is the time when we really should be doing something, because yes, we're now off the plank and in the water and it's awful cold. I also acknowledge what Doug and Barbara said. It's kind of not the time because people's attention is elsewhere. And very specifically in terms of sending out signals to the EU or anybody else, those most likely to be in a position to do it, and I'm really talking Nicola Sturgeon here, is absolutely, totally avoiding politicising anything to do with COVID and borders and all the conversations that have been had when she and Boris have clashed in some way. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for her to U-turn out of that into a position where, right, we are going for independence next time round, and here's the start of it, and we are talking to Europeans, etc., etc. That, to me, is our problem, because we as a movement can have all these thoughts and we can try to push all these things and stick them on billboards, but until the politicians who are the face of Scotland start doing some of that, it's not going to go anywhere.
Well, Chris said last night in an interview, and this was something I found really interesting. He says, Nicola's busy with COVID, the health sector is busy with COVID, the education sector is busy with getting people back to school. Mike Russell no longer has Brexit to deal with, and he is the Minister for the Constitution. So at the end of the day, Mike, go and do your job. I mean, he's going to be out here in another 10 months, and I'm sure Mike Russell would absolutely love to have that on his tombstone. Sorry, so say his political epitaph.
Only retired.
Well, I think there's a few things there. The devolution agreement really meant that Boris can't say no, but he is saying no. So then the next step is to take them to court. Don't think there's any two ways about that. That's the next step for the Scottish Government, is to take Boris to the Westminster Government to court over it. And the thing about the EU is the goalposts have changed a bit for them since 2014, quite a lot, and that they don't need the UK. Their trade agreements with the other countries that are just as big as and bigger than the UK since Brexit. So this thing about they need us more than we need them, that does not apply. And the other thing is that we don't have any border security in place at all. So imports, exports, what will change from the EU to UK? What's going to change? We're just going to let everybody in.
Oh, sorry.
This year is a write-off. If people are going to be approaching people in a position of influence like Nicola Sturgeon in the EU, then totally it has been next year or after. I mean, just now it's not feasible. But we need to plan ahead. And also Boris will do what he wants. But Boris doesn't care about anything. We saw that with Dominic Cummings. It's very difficult to force him to do anything. And that the corrupt government, they are corrupt to the core. They're hunting hundreds of millions of pounds to all their friends. There's no accountability. They just don't care. They'll sit there and lie, and then the matter is over. We consider the matter closed. This is going to be the story for the next 5 years, and that was probably the biggest realisation after the Conservatives won. It's just like this. It was great to see so many SNP seats, but almost powerless. And until Labour started doing a bit better, I don't know. But I don't think, like I said, we can wait 5 years. What can we do? And we need a plan, a credible plan.
Yes, William.
I was just going to say, when it comes to going to court, I'd rather not take Boris to court. I'd rather challenge him to take us to court for asserting our rights.
Absolutely.
That's all.
I completely agree with that thing as well.
We all agree that there's a growing sense amongst, let's call it the yes community rather than make it political. There's a growing sense that we want something to happen, and it's going to have to be us in the yes movement to make it happen. Whatever the this had happen is, it's going to come down to us as the sovereign people to say strong enough, etc., and had enough. Let's make something happen.
Joe, you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe because, I missed the discussion yesterday and the previous days. I'm not too sure if maybe there was a discussion about Catalonia, what really happens. In my view, I've got a feeling that the UK government might be using that one as sort of like a template that will just do as what Spain did, and that's it. Already they have get away with 2 requests, one that was made to Theresa May and one to Boris Johnson. And I'm also of a view that the time is now. It cannot go on like this. Not maybe because, I am rushing, but also the leadership to mainly concentrate on COVID-19 and some other issues. That's not enough. And I think maybe the other discussion was around the views of EU. Again, for me, that's not enough. I think the current governments right now and the SNP holding, I can say maybe more MSPs, in government. Yeah, I mean in parliament. It is not certain that where we are going with the way things they are. What happens if they don't get majority? What if, because things they happen, I never thought that Boris is going to get the majority that he got. So I don't want to be very reluctant and say that could be, another option, that when we go for next year elections, maybe majority is going to be the yes. It might not be, or maybe it might be, but with a tiny majority. And it might be still difficult, because when you look overally with other issues, the government has to be doing very well for them to be trusted that, apart from independence, there are still a good party to vote for, among other things. Otherwise, we'll be still in trouble, So I think, there are a lot of issues that needs to be looked at, one by one, and make sure that we get them right.
Rather sadly, I think he may have changed his tune kind of radically, but rather sadly on Catalonia, it was Pete Wishart that was arguing we could be facing that situation. It wasn't the Westminster government might be doing all sorts of things, but it was Pete Wishart that came out with that, Joe. It was weird.
Just to clarify, Spain's constitution precludes a referendum. We don't have a written constitution here, but we very well could have, if we're not careful, written by the Tories. And God help us if that happens. And they could preclude a referendum. We don't. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. But that's why I come back to the point that timing is really critical for a number of reasons, because we have no control over what the people who are refusing, whose best interests are to refuse Scotland's independence referendum. And also back to, looking back to the question about campaigning, I spoke to Keith recently at a Zoom meeting that we were at, like, kind of local one, because Keith's obviously the deputy leader, and Keith was also tasked, he's not a cabinet position, but he's tasked with independence. And Keith agreed with me that although we are not actually campaigning, I think Nicola Sturgeon's playing it absolutely bang on, that not politicising COVID, which is showing a responsible government. It's like, fake it till you make it, act like an independent country, people will start having more confidence in it. But I and lots of my friends and colleagues, and it's the same people that stick, campaign for independence, that, campaign, I'm in the SNP, that, put leaflets through doors, run community councils, run village halls, whatever. Same people that people know that you've got the big sign on your fence when it comes to an election that are doing that. So you're still campaigning without campaigning. You're letting people know the level of, community, it's a trust. If you can trust people that communities can pull together, people can start visualising how that works at a national level as well and building their confidence. So Keith agreed with me that, we can't, although that Nicola can't officially campaign, that would be, a nightmare at the moment in the media and everything, but we're still campaigning. Campaigning doesn't stop. What we're campaigning for is to prove that we are absolutely capable of running our own affairs. We make better decisions for the people who live here, and we make those decisions here, as a community and as, as a nation. And I think, that's really important. But that energy is really important to harness, because the things that pull us together, I used to do this at work as a consultant, the Venn diagram. You get folk for finance, you get folk for sales, a polar opposite objectives. The first thing I did in the facilitation is get that centrepiece, get them to agree what joins them, what binds them. Independence binds us. All the other issues, you've got different opinions, that's normal. In an independent country, there'll be other parties. The same way there is probably more consensual party politics like they do like in Europe and Nordic regions. It's the UK that's the anomaly in the world, the way we do first past the post, winner takes all, no written constitution, whatever the chaps thinks viable, let's go for it, and no ramifications. So the UK is the odd one out. We have to start normalising normal politics, and we have to start really getting people involved in participatory democracy and the idea of that, because the citizens' assembly stuff just started off before COVID and everything, and we have a real opportunity to set out our intentions. There's I'm not going to get into any of these issues, by the way, but there's lots of stuff that's pulling people in different directions at the moment, which is very divisive and very distracting. And what it comes down to is people's rights. And if you've got somebody who's a no voter, for example, take it from the yes, no side, you've got somebody who's a no voter who will never change, they're no voters and they'll never change. They have to be assured that the day after Scotland votes for independence, they'll be safe. And because we just think, oh, but everybody's like us and we'll all be nice and we'll all go and, be part of them, we'll all build together and people don't have that assurance unless it's written down in a higher law. And, things in America that have absolutely saved people from Trump is the Constitution. The Constitution in America is not perfect. It was written hundreds of years ago, but it is there. It's a higher law. And unless we set out our intention of citizens' rights, who we want to be, what we stand for and what we won't stand for, balanced rights and protections, that gives a huge assurance to people to put their confidence in that box that might be swithering, that are really not that confident but are really fearful of Brexit and what might happen next. And a Tory government they know they can't trust. They're doing that job for us. They're proving, they're thinking we've got 4 years, we'll make hay, we can do whatever the hell we like to you. So if we can get that timing right and show that we're the safer option and bring people to that and feel that they've got skin in the game. I mean, I'm having a personal argument with the whole thing with the council at the moment about bins. But the mistake they made is they didn't do a consultation. If you're trying to implement change, bring people with you, make people feel they've got skin in the game, that their opinion is important. And even if they don't agree, they can know they've had a say and there's consensus and it's transparent. We have to do that at a national level.
I think that's what's happening with the way Nicola's conducting herself over COVID, that people who have not necessarily been in favour of Nicola, for whatever reason, are beginning to show her some respect for how she's dealing with it. And she does do the politics. I mean, this has come up with the border today. Boris is hopping mad that there isn't a border. And it was Nicola that prompted that. She's a canny wee lassie at times.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Then she said she would go down to Newcastle and see how I liked it if she made laws down there.
Now you've got loads of people from Newcastle wanting to move up here to get free prescriptions and free education.
Less COVID.
Well, less COVID. Indeed. But, I think Nicola's doing a good job, but I think it needs to be at every level. We need to be consistent. Somebody said earlier on about, I think it was Pat, about the common message. I don't know if it was you, Barbara, that said, and then Pat kind of followed up. But we need a consistent and a common message across everybody, and it needs to be simple. And I have to say, as much as I hate it now because of the connotation of Brexit, but we missed a trick and didn't taking back control, because that is such a clever slogan. Good one. So simple.
That's
the Tories are always good at coming up with phrases, though. They
pay people a lot of money.
Always seem to hit the nail on the head.
Because they have a research group that look at it.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason Dave and I decided to try and do this and actually have a plan, call it a Plan B week. It's to draw out exactly what you're talking about, Ali. How do we get within the Yes movement a common theme to work to?
Yep.
If the Yes movement comes up with that common theme, a kind of agreed general position, this is what we want to see happen. And it's seen to be the Yes movement that's driving. It's the bit I keep coming back to. I've told them, we're a whole different bunch of people in the Yes movement, right? You couldn't pick a more diverse group. But if we can find a way of coming together and saying, this is the way we see Scotland becoming independent, I don't think Nicola will not listen to that. I'm sure she will. She's a politician. She's a politician. Politicians listen to how people are going to vote.
Personally, I think she wants it. Sorry, Joe.
Independence will make us safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We need that. But I think at conference a couple of years ago, I think it was, and Nicola stood up in her speech and she said, it's over to you guys. It's over to like the grassroots and stuff. And I stand by that. I do still think she wants us to do that, but has got to be very careful in the way she positions that. But there's nothing stopping anybody from having conversations with their neighbours. Our whole group, we created Butterflies Rising for exactly this purpose, because we felt politics is very transactional. And, all the stuff I've ever done as a consultant, if you want to keep, it's much cheaper to keep customers than it is to get new customers. So how do you do that? You build a relationship with them. Relationships are based in trust. Trust is based in credibility and integrity over time. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. But why do we not treat elections like that? Because I think a lot of people in politics is their comfort zone campaigning. Campaigning is very transactional. If you've got people at community council level, you've got eyes and ears on the ground. If you engage them and you proactively say, see an issue here, could that issue be happening over there? Is there something we can do best practice across the country? It happens. It does happen, and it's such a creative nation. I think, I can't remember who it was that said that, it might have been Leslie Riddoch, that Scotland's never had land, so everything's up here. That's all we've owned. So that's why people are so creative. But we don't. I think we've got so many people that are so talented that are only wanted in political parties for sticking leaflets through doors.
Yeah.
I've watched
the private sector.
I watched William speak at the Perth rally. Yes, I did, William. I listened to you.
No.
Yes, I did. But here's my point from that. It wasn't just the Yes movement that attended that rally. We all been in the marches. And it started off, you would not get a politician appearing. Slowly but surely, they noticed that we were having an effect. And slowly but surely, I do the live streams as a volunteer for Independence Live. I actually ended up interviewing Pete Wishart at that rally. They weren't there beforehand. That's come back to my point, Ali, exactly what you're talking about. The people that are building trust within the Yes community are the people that can then say, look, we're on the march, we're having a conversation, please participate with us, politicians, and then we start to influence them the way we want them to go. I'm convinced of that.
You're right, Mike. Build it and they will come. You know, that's what's happened with the marches. That's what's happened with things like the gathering that was done a few years ago. You know, who knew you would pack out the Albert Halls for people to come up with, I mean, ideas on currency, ideas on constitution. I mean, it was detailed stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of stuff, but you need to, I keep coming back to, you need to give people some skin in the game. You need to make people feel valued. And we've got so much talent that is totally wasted by getting literally leaflet stuffing. And some of the leaflets could be stuffed in a bin because they're rubbish. So, you know, we need to be better than that. You know what I mean? We need to learn. The first thing I've said all the time, because this is just the way I've always operated, is the first thing we do when we finish a project is we do a complete project review, drains up. And I always do stop, start, continue. What do we do? What really didn't work? What would we just not do again? We'll learn from. What could we have done but we didn't for money or time or whatever? What do we start? And what really worked? What do we continue? And everybody gets post-it notes, red, amber, green, and they all stick them up. We discuss it because the low-hanging fruit, you know, a lot of people want to talk about what went well, but you don't move the dial by keeping talking about what you did well. You move the dial by fixing the things you didn't do well or the things you could have done. And I think we need a much more honest conversation, not making saying that, oh, you're rubbish, or, you know, you're not, you didn't do a good job. But it's like the kind of continual improvement thing, you know, that so many countries just think, why wouldn't you do that? You know, why? You learn, we teach our kids, make mistakes, that's where you learn lessons. But then we seem averse to doing it as adults, which is a bit weird because we're just big kids.
Is there anybody else got anything to add to this?
I liked it. What Ali just said, I did like that. I think that's a thing we can do, and we can make sure that the politicians we know that we're doing it, and we can also make sure that our local communities know that we're doing it in various ways. And maybe using this brief period of downtime during the COVID lockdown gives us a chance just to formulate some things we can start doing. And certainly locally, we're maybe thinking along these lines. We were going places with our Perth up for 6 months, and it was just starting to get going.
Yeah.
And don't know when it will get going again, but that's the sort of thing that we can perhaps use as a sort of outreach in various ways. That and the local Commonweal group too.
I think there's been a lot of aspiration this evening. Maybe not quite as much process, because at the end of the day, to get to the aspiration, we need to go through the actual process. But could I just take a brief opinion from everybody here? Do you think we should continue with Plan A, or do you think we should go somewhere else without actually specifying? Because I think we've all got pretty different ideas about where we should go. Do we think we should continue with Plan A?
I think we should, but it has to happen before May next year, before the election. So Plan A needs to be exhausted by the May election, so people know fine well that it's not going to work. We're going to get ignored, and it's really Plan B. It's on the table.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you couldn't start that until next year. You know, you'd have to do that February, March next year. If you start doing things at the end of this year, even people are going to take it the wrong way.
We need to go through the conference in September. Yes, George.
I think Plan A, it has got to be done now before we get to next year, so that people, they will know when we go to the next elections that we have tried Plan A and it has already failed. You know, we mustn't delay it maybe very close to the elections, because I still think that there are some other outstanding issues, because I really talk to a lot of people as well, you know, especially Central Scotland. And the views that I hear, you know, they are different. And yes, Brexit, you know, it does contribute quite a lot, but it's not the only thing. I have been attracted, you know, to independence, and it had nothing to do with the Brexit. Till today, it has got nothing to do with the Brexit. It has got to do with believing in independence on its own. Coming from a country that was once a British colony, and you know, it gained the independence. Full stop. And there are some other people who does not have the separate. So everybody who has got his own idea of independence has got to come on board. And you know, every single vote to the ballot box is very important. So because we don't know all the issues, you know, that brings people, you know, to independence. I am a good one example, and other people that I talk to, and other people that I convinced to vote, you know, the other way, you know, honestly, SNP, you know, in the previous elections, who did not vote SNP before, who told me that they are all the way Labour, but I managed to convince them to vote SNP, and mainly because of my strong beliefs about independence. So I think Plan A, it has got to be explored as soon as possible. Then we go towards next year elections, knowing very well that we've already attempted to that. Then what is the future, you know, beyond success or failure of Plan A? That's what I think.
I tend to go along with Joe, but it doesn't stop Rory being right. If Joe and I walk up and down the street, Rory, demanding that we have Plan A and a request for Section 30 this year, it must happen now. It just adds weight when you come along next year just before the election and pile in everyone else. I think that's the bottom line to this. It's why I keep coming back to it's the yes movement that will make something happen.
So basically, coming on to what Rory said, it's like he said that we could go, if it wasn't done this year, Plan B would need to be in place for the next election. The problem is that the SNP are going to have their conference in September, and it has to be adopted by the conference, so it won't be on a manifesto. So that causes problems as far as time is concerned. That's why I always want to tie down process, because it's like, I keep going back to this thing that Mike Russell's out of a job. Yes, Barbara. Barbara, yes.
Can I say that Angus Brendan McNeil, he would like people to go back, the SNP members, to go back to their branches and try and get the support for his Plan B. Really, that was his final message to us, really, was, you know, it's going to take the branches to push this forward. I think he's going to get help with his
the wording of the
proposal.
Resolution.
His resolution, yeah, because last time they didn't accept it.
Yeah.
They said that there's a reason, good reasons for them not accepting it. It's not that they were against his plan, it's just that his resolution, the wording of his resolution was all wrong.
It was not competent.
It was not, that's the wording. It wasn't competent. So this time he's getting help to make sure that it's competent before he puts it up. And then he's wanting the support from as many SNP branches as possible to get it through. So that's the direction he's taking it.
Angus MacLeod is helping him make it competent.
Angus MacLeod?
Yep.
He was the one that stood in the way of it last November.
Because it wasn't competent.
They like to stick to rules.
Angus apparently said to Chris, happy to help you make it competent. It's not competent the way it is. You know, and so Chris has said he's kind of had to swallow his pride a lot, or no, it's Angus, swallow his pride a little bit and say, okay,
we'll accept your help.
We'll accept your help.
Well, yes, there's no very much talk to me about you shot me on that one.
Yeah, well,
I kind of feel like I've been useful to you now.
you took his breath away.
Yes, Ali.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
Ali.
Can I just say that back to Rory's point, and I do really take that on board, but the kind of elephant in the room is Brexit. So they're not stopping. They don't care. about COVID or what the position is, they're piling ahead. And as much as I think it's good that we're kind of taking the kind of grown-up approach in this, we do also have, as well as the COVID crisis, we have got Brexit looming, which is piled on top, the misery on top of this, and we won't be in the EU by the end of the year. So what I would like to see, and I don't know, I've not obviously seen Angus's resolution, competent or otherwise, but I would like to see a roadmap, because I think a roadmap is maybe that common ground that we could get behind, that we need to see a roadmap to independence. Because that's something that people can kind of visualize and see that it's a journey. And things like COVID, we have no control over. We have no control over what's going to happen in England. We've not really got a huge amount of control over what's happening here at the moment. But hopefully we're in a position we can, with the track, trace, protect, that we will make things as best as they can be. But we really have no control over things like global pandemics. But what we do have control over is our intention. I think we can set that out in a roadmap. And if to ask, and I know it's the kind of lingo now, the plan A, plan B, but it's a bit annoying. I think it would be better to kind of get back to things like, that we will do due diligence by going back, as we did at the Edinburgh Agreement, to ask for the powers devolved to Holyrood. But we now have, through Holyrood, the power to run referendums on anything, because that's one of the things Mike Russell put through. Did that pass? I've lost a lot on what passed. So it did.
Yes.
So that helps the case, because we have got competency to run referendums. It doesn't explicitly say what it's on.
Ali, watch very carefully on Saturday when Dave and I do a roundup in this.
Mm-hmm.
There may be, in my opinion, and I've got a petition in at the Scottish Parliament, there may be a serious flaw in the Referendum Scotland Act.
Okay.
It's something I did a video on, and I'm going to raise that on Saturday when Dave and I have a chat, because everyone will say referendum, referendum, referendum. The petition I've got in calls on the Scottish Parliament to reconsider something, and I'll explain that on Saturday, so that if we're going to go down the road of a referendum on anything, because the referendums bill covers not just independence, you could have a referendum on whatever subject you like, if you like.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure it's watertight, and I've got doubts whether it's watertight.
Okay, I mean, for me, I kind of mentioned participatory democracy earlier on. For me, we talk a lot about the gold standard being the kind of Section 30, asking permission, the gold standard. But, for me, the actual gold standard is to look at what they did in Ireland, and they've done in other countries as well. Citizens' Assembly, they tackled two really, really constitutionally complex issues in Ireland by doing a Citizens' Assembly, and then they had it, for approval to the national referendum, and then they codified it in the Constitution in the Parliament. That's the gold standard. So if we show that we are democratic and that we are trying to do all these things, we've now had a Citizens' Assembly, that's kind of gone through, that is now a process that's there to be used. So if we are showing to the world that we are trying to listen and involve the nation, whereas we're getting refused by a country that tried to prorogue Parliament and stop parliamentary sovereignty and sack the civil service, and they're just they're trolling us now, do you know what I mean, with what they're doing. The case just stacks up, aside from all the things that the EU would gain from having Scotland as a member. I mean, they would be courting Scotland for the resources that we have, and it's actually up to the people of Scotland what relationship we have with Europe. So I think we really need to kind of keep pushing as participatory democracy as we can to get people involved.
One last thing I'd like to chuck in, it came from Indie Truck Davy, and it was one of the things we put up on the screen, where if you go to the schedules in the Scotland Act, there's one bit where it refers, just starts off, the Constitution. And if you've ever listened to David McGuinness, he'll say, look, if I can't touch it, if I can't see it, if I can't hold it, it doesn't exist. And it's the strongest argument, in my opinion, for why we have to be independent, because we're being held to something that doesn't exist, which is the UK Constitution. There isn't one.
And the Supreme Court in England have already basically said that a convention doesn't have any weight legally with the school convention. So basically, the whole English constitution's got no weight at all.
It's a huge big anomaly. It really is.
And we have no arithmetic in Westminster to stop anything going through that is a new act, in the same way they did when they did the power grab, that they retrospectively put in an act of parliament with the Brexit bill. Now, you know, we've got no arithmetic that can stop that. They could, I mean, there's always whispers and talks about they're going to do like a new act of union type, you know, bill and whatever. We have no control over that. That's what people have to realise, how powerless we are. Absolutely powerless over our own future.
Can I come back to something that you said a while ago, which is about a roadmap? Because one of the things, you know, we've talked about Brexit. I don't think people really are going to get Brexit until it actually happens.
Yeah.
I think it's a wee bit like COVID. People, is it there? Is it not there? I don't know anybody that's had it. You know, they're very ambivalent. I think Brexit's going to hit everybody, and I think a large percentage of the nation don't realise how bad it's going to be and how difficult it's going to be. And I think suddenly we'll find a big push for something else. If the roadmap is in place before then, this is what we're trying to do, and then suddenly all these people will maybe buy into that a bit more. I think it's a great idea.
I think we need the roadmap, but I'm not convinced some people won't entrench their views and just head down. I can't take any more change. But I think the roadmap helps, absolutely, you know, for people. And also, we've already got people that have come over that we've had conversations with in the Constituency area, particularly universities, who are, you know, people who've worked with Erasmus and stuff, that they were absolute unionists, and that broke them. And they've come over to us.
Well, that's what I mean. COVID has changed, and how the Scottish Government has changed people's views quite a lot, you know, and I think if the sort of if you know, Brexit is going to sort of have a similar effect, and I think we'll get more people from that. And if there's a plan of action about this is kind of what we want to do and this is where we want to go, then, you know, I think that's a great idea. Great idea. Really like it.
See, just on that, Doug, see, learning from what went right with the Scottish Government's response to COVID, the things that people responded to is a clarity of message. And, you know, the things that, you know, they're seeing, we've never had an opportunity like that we've got an unedited view of the First Minister going into people's houses. There's not had an editorial spin from the media on it. And they've also seen Boris Johnson. So you've got your compare and contrast right there. That's a great tool, compare and contrast. Also, the clarity of message. And she's got a roadmap. The phasing thing, that's a roadmap. Do you know what I mean? So we need to say, that's the process that can be used. We need to take that on and say, okay, let's use that, because people like it, people respond to it, it gives them a degree of certainty, and it gives them a degree of opportunity, a bit of a vision, you know, of what we could be and what the roadblocks are, and treat them like grown-ups, which is the other thing that Nicola has done, treat them like grown-ups and saying, look, this is not going to be a silver bullet, this is just going to be our decision. We'll make mistakes, they'll be our mistakes. We'll have successes, they'll be our successes, but they'll be ours. We will have control, because being powerless is very debilitating, and I think people don't like that feeling. So hopefully a vision, a roadmap helps.
I just want to make one point before you go.
Yeah.
I think maybe Labour Party, it is driving the issue of federalism. I don't know, putting it in parallel with independence. We need also to be prepared to challenge that argument, because it might be as good as independence to other people. And we might be also facing a challenge with that. So our view should not be sort of like attacking like a Brexit, or let me just say the Tory agenda, the Tory views, right, which I completely disagree with. And even if there was no SNP, I would never vote the Tories anyway. So I'm a bit concerned that our focus also should be prepared to counter the arguments about federalism, because they might be as good not convince me per se, is to say that, okay, federalism is good. I want full independence. But for other people, they might see it as maybe that's a good option than, a complete a breaking out. So it might also need to be thought about it and good arguments, so that we are much stronger.
I'd say the only argument against federalism that we don't have any arithmetic on it. England won't vote for federalism. They never will. It's not in their interest to do so. So it's another argument for how powerless the Scottish arithmetic Westminster is.
Yeah.
Even if we wanted it, we wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
Can I take the opportunity? I'm not trying to stop the conversation, but I want to thank you all, every one of you, for taking part this afternoon. Welcome to your first meeting with the Twa Auld Heids. I hope as Dave and I develop this, that you can come back again and have another open discussion. I think that's very, very important. I don't like this, like a lot of people, I don't actually like the sound of my voice when I hear myself speaking. I seem to find it hard to stop it, apparently. A lot of people tell me that. But seriously, I want to thank you, each and every one of you. And if you are invited back, I hope you'll accept the invitation.
Oh, thank you very, very much.
Thanks very much, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll get with that.
Any other points anyone wants to raise? Please go ahead. Go ahead, Barbara.
No, I'm just what Michael Gove is up to at the moment, which I think might be to take, they're totally undermining Scottish government all the time, and I think this is going to get worse. So that's all I'm offering.
Yeah. There was a programme on Independence Live called The Nation Talks. John Drummond does it. And he had Billy Kay on the other night, if you watched it. And one of the questions he asked Billy was, can Scotland afford to go on its own? And what he should have asked was, can England afford it when Scotland goes on its own?
Yeah.
Because that lies behind all of this. It lies behind Michael Gove, it lies behind Boris, it lies behind everything. If you do the maths in this, whether you're looking at natural resources, land that we own, the type of people we are, it's entirely different. It's England that's got the problem and they know it.
Yeah.
Westminster in particular.
Our problem's confidence. Scotland's problem is confidence. And they don't have confidence in themselves, and that's what
that's why I used the word safe.
Yeah.
Because they frightened people last time. They targeted women. They targeted women and children. People who need to be safe and secure, and the pensioners. And they used independence as unsafe. Yeah. Paraphrasing. And actually, Scotland, independent Scotland's now the safe option. You hit on earlier.
I changed the name on a small Facebook page I run, and we all used to refer to 2014 as Project Fear.
Yeah.
And then you got the meetings in Glasgow, which are called Hope Over Fear. Yeah. And Dave knows this. I changed mine to Action Over Fear, because I think that's what's the next. Action over hope, I beg your pardon, action over hope, because I think that's the next. Thanks, Dave. I think that's the next thing we're going to have to do. Is show all the actions we take. It's your route map, Jill.
Yeah. Well, because project management, a project is an objective with a timescale. If you don't have that, you've just got a random series of tasks. Yep. We're in the random series of tasks phase at the moment. We have to put a project structure on it. We need a roadmap, because if we don't have that, it's like Martin Luther King, I had a dream, to pose to John Kennedy, I will put a man in the moon by the end of the decade. We're still fighting for civil rights, but we've allegedly had a man on the moon. I don't know your theories about that, but in all seriousness, a project has to have a timescale. Without that, you don't have a project. You can call it Plan A and Plan B, but let's call it Project A or Project B, because it's one project. Actually, we could have different means of getting there, but we need a roadmap. We need the timescale.
Yeah,
excellent.
You're going to lead the Yes campaign then, Ali?
What's that?
You're going to lead the Yes campaign for us?
I'd vote for her.
Exactly.
Okay, for the next meeting, everyone has to get their bit of paper out, their pen out, and we've all got to come back with a route map.
Yeah.
It doesn't go around
That's
the
your homework.
circle.
That's the homework.
That's your homework.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming along because I've lived a lot night sitting talking to you. It's been just like the good old days, apart from we can't have a drink afterwards.
I'm having a drink.
I'm not surprised you'll probably need it. Sorry, I'll cut that out. Right, so thanks very much for coming on, and see this will go out on Friday night, and hopefully it'll make people think that's why we started this thing in the first place, to just, we're all capable of it, but it's sometimes you need to have a sounding board to bang against, and all of a sudden ideas come through, and that's the idea. So thanks very much, and we'll follow up on it, and we'll be in touch with you for future programs. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
You're now all allowed to leave.
All right.